Hey, good morning. Today I want to share with you a pretty unique and special bicycle from 1966, a JRJ, which is a Bob Jackson bicycle, handmade steel bicycle. And this bicycle had a technological innovation years ahead of its time that I want to share with you. But just as a teaser, I'm going to show you the wheels so you can see the wheels on this bicycle. This would be the front wheel, but it could also be the rear wheel. Here's the other wheel, exactly the same, front wheel, or it could be the rear wheel. This bicycle had hubs on it, hub technology way ahead of its time. I would consider it the first true through-axle bicycle on a road bike. So I wanted to show it to you today, and I'll point out some other fascinating details about this beautiful vintage steel road bike. This custom bike was built for and sold to a bike lover named Stark Hill in February of 1966. Stark Hill was a personal friend of Spence Wolfe, who opened a Cupertino bike shop in Cupertino, California in 1953. And Spence built this beautiful bike for him on a Bob Jackson frame. That adjustable stem is an Ambrosio stem from Italy, and the handlebars are Cinelli handlebars. You can see the chrome lugs, beautiful panel paint job. It has Weinmann brake levers. The really unique feature that I wanted to show you on this bike is the Cinelli Bivalent Hubs. These hubs are made an innovation by Cinelli in the early 60s. He had two versions. One had a steel barrel, one had an aluminum barrel. Came out early 60s and then late 60s for the alloys. The alloy hubs are what's on this bike. These hubs were made by Campagnolo. You could see at the hubs that the exactly the same. They have a splined ring on one side, and the other side looks pretty much like a standard hub. And Cinelli's idea was that if you made one wheel that fit in the front or rear of the bicycle, race mechanics would have an easier time doing wheel changes in races. Since they could grab any wheel and they'd only have to carry one wheel, they wouldn't have to carry fronts and rears. Cinelli's invention must have been huge in Italy because it was prominently featured in their Bible of the Sport in 1968, the CONI manual, including a complete breakdown of all the parts and special instructions for frame preparation, which involved setting the frame spacing on the rear to 124 millimeters. This allows clearance for slipping the splined ring on the hub into the freewheel body when installing the rear wheel. Notice how the freewheel is attached to the right dropout, stays attached to the dropout. And just like a modern through-axle hub, you have a through-axle that comes through, threaded on the end. In this case, there's actually a nut and a bolt, or like a cup, that captures the end of the hub. And then the other side of the hub, the spline side of the hub, mates with the internal spline on the free wheel. Freewheel is a Regina freewheel made for Cinelli to work with his system. You see the freewheel is bolted onto the dropout. And once the wheel's in place, you just thread it in and lock it down. And the spacing is the same front and rear. So either wheel can be put either place. Real quick, you may not have heard the term through-axle. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Most modern bikes today, or high-end modern bikes, have what's called a through-axle. And a through-axle is a sort of a new way of attaching wheels to bicycles. They came into popularity because of the use of disc brakes, where it's really good to have a sturdy front end to reinforce the stress that the brake puts on when you hit the brake. So the through-axle, mounting on the front of the bike, runs through the fork in front, through the frame in the rear. And it's actually a threaded rod, goes all the way through the frame to hold the wheel on. Makes it real quick and easy to get the wheel on and off. That's a very sturdy attachment. So that's what we're talking about when I use the term through-axle. So I'll put a wheel in to show how it's done. Pull the through-axle out of the way. And you bring the wheel up, slide it into in between the two. And you spread the drop out a little bit. You wiggle it until the spline drops into the cassette. Then you just thread in the through-axle and tighten it down. Then you're ready to ride. And notice that we never took the chain off or the freewheel off. So for a race mechanic, that saves time. You're not fussing with the chain. There's no chance that you tangle the chain or the chain gets jammed between the chain rings. So it could have been a real time saver if the race teams adopted it, but they didn't. It wasn't really accepted. The race teams are typically happy with what they have, and it takes a lot to convince them to change. So take the wheel out, just reverse the process, pull the through-axle through all the way. That releases this side. And then it's a little tricky to get the hub out. You drop it out of the cassette side first, or the freewheel side, and then it'll drop right out. And then just to show you, here's the other wheel. Fits the same way. Now I'll show you the front wheel, the front end. And putting on the front wheel is like putting on the rear wheel. The only thing you have to remember is that on the front wheel, the spline for the freewheel goes on the left side, and the wheel just comes in. Once again, just spin the through axle, tighten it down, and you're ready to ride. Removing it. See, it has a spring on the end so that it helps you when it releases, when the thread leaves the last thread in the nut, it springs loose, helps you remove it. The wheel basically falls off on its own. Pretty slick, pretty amazing design. Cino Cinelli was way ahead of his time. I'd like to think what he would think if he saw the bikes today with through axles on them. Two of the standout features of the TA Criterium Crankset, triple crankset, and the Spence Wolfe adapted rear derailleur. Notice that there's a special adapter plate here that allows a short cage derailleur to handle a freewheel with some large cogs on it. Also, the long cage derailleur, you have enough to tension the chain so that you can shift a triple chainring. The TA Criterium Crankset is unique in that it's an aluminum crankset. The early cranksets, we had cothered cranksets, which were held together with a cotter on a round spindle. Those cranks on the round spindles tended to get stuck, or the cotter would loosen and the cranks would move around when you were pedaling. So TA came up with this ingenious solution for their new alloy Criterium crank, where the spindle was actually sort of shaped like a teardrop. You see the little diamond on one edge there? And then they still used the cotter, but it wasn't really a cotter. It was more like a binder bolt, like on a seat. So it's very easy to remove these cranks, and you could also move them in and out to adjust chain line up to 4 millimeters, which was ingenious. On the rear derailleur, I don't know the complete history, but I believe that Spence actually made these adapter plates. It looks like a piece of aluminum that's bent just right so that you can align the pulleys. And that's a Campagnolo record chrome-plated bronze derailleur. That originally would have probably only shifted up to a 24 or 26 tooth cog. But this bike has a 28 tooth cog on it. A nice detail on this bike is the tied and soldered spokes. Spence Wolfe was famous for his wheels, and on his wheels he took the extra step. At the end of the wheel build, it's kind of tricky to see, but in here you might be able to see that the spokes where they cross, they've been wrapped with a very fine wire, usually 7 wraps, pulled very tightly. And then to keep the wrap in place, a drop of solder is put on there, and then it's cleaned. And then what you've done is you've made it so that these spokes can't move, and movement in spokes often causes wear at the cross, causes the spokes to move at the hub, and can lead to spoke breakage. So these spokes are over 50 years old. The wheel was built, and they're Robergel Trois Etoiles spokes, stainless steel spokes from France. And the wheels are still straight and true and round, and you could tell from looking at the bike how much love it's seen, how many road miles, and it's just a testament to the quality of Spence's craftsmanship that the wheels have held up all these years. The wheels are actually 700C wheels, Super Champion gentleman rims. It's kind of fun to see the Specialized Bicycle Imports label on the tire. That's an early label. That might even be before Specialized became super famous for making tires with their turbo tire. It's a big hit in the 80s. Seating was completely first class with a Brooks B17 Swallow saddle. Nice Bob Jackson wraparound seat stay, seat lug construction. That's a through bolt for the seat binder. Nothing to break or fail. The rear brake is reverse mounted. You know it's been that way originally because you can see that it has a curved cable hanger that's also reverse mounted. Lovely chromed head lugs. And the seat lugs chromed. And really interesting paneled paint job. The panels are nice. They've been outlined in this red paint, and I don't know if Bob Jackson did this, maybe he did. But Stark Hill's name looks to be painted in the same color as the red that's outlining the panels. Got a TA bottle cage. This is before that we were, frame builders were drilling the frames and putting on braze-ons for screwing on bottle cages. So that one's clamped on. Adjustable stem was a pretty cool idea. Take that bolt out, you could slide the stem forward and then you can put the bolt back in and tighten it up.
This bike has the basic French pedals of the time, but only 8 years after inventing his bivalent hubs with the first Thru-Axles, Cinelli correctly predicted the future once again and came out with the first clipless pedals with his M71s. Amazing.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this look at a fine old bike from the 60s by Bob Jackson, built by Spence Wolfe. I've ridden it a little bit and it rides as nice as it looks. And if you had a JRJ and know more about these bikes and Bob Jackson bikes, please leave a comment and tell your story and share your information, because a lot of people see this and they'd love to learn too. As I was putting the finishing touches on this video, I got the news that Bob Jackson Cycles, after 85 years in business, was closing. But then a few days later, I heard that he wasn't closing. The company had received some investment money and they were going to stay open. So that's good news if you want a Bob Jackson bicycle or you have a Bob Jackson bicycle that you need refinished. And I'll put a link in the description to his website so you can check it out. The other thing, as I was wrapping up this video, is I was thinking about Cinelli, the man, the inventor. You know, we've used Cinelli products forever, it seems like, or at least I have. Handlebars, stems, but I never really put it together until I started playing around with these bivalent hubs, making interchangeable wheels. And then I remembered that he had come out with the first clipless pedal with the M71s in 1970. That's about 15 years before Look came out with clipless pedals. So that's some really big innovations there. I mean, today we ride Thru-Axles on almost all high-end bikes, and everybody's riding clipless pedals pretty much. He also was innovative with frame design. The full sloping crown, which you only saw for a second in my footage, was an ingenious way to make the fork blades shorter. This made the forks stiffer and provided better handling in his opinion. A lot of riders agreed. So he was really on the cutting edge and was quite an innovator. I don't know if you could compare him to Campagnolo, but he's not far away. So that was a real eye-opener. I did visit Cinelli once in 1990 and met Antonio Colombo, who was the president of Columbus Tubing and Cinelli at the time. And one of my prized possessions is a Cinelli headband that he gave me. So I have a connection to Cinelli, and someday I'd love to get a beautiful Cinelli road bike that I could enjoy. I have ridden Bob Jackson bikes before, but I've never actually owned one. So that's the end of this video. I appreciate you watching, and it would be great if you subscribe to my channel if you're interested in this kind of bicycle content. There'll be a lot more of it. Thanks a lot.